field of medicine, research plays an important role in discovering new treatments and making sure that we use existing treatments in the best way possible. Research can find answers to things that are unknown, filling gaps in knowledge and changing the way that healthcare professionals work. Without research, advancements that have improved lives and saved others may not have come to pass. For educational institutions like ours, the research component allows for a broader educational experience whereby students are able to explore the effects of applying new thought processes through study and testing. I am happy that this is reflected by the research papers that will be presented today, not only by our second year students, as well by our third year students this afternoon. The papers this morning focus on our adaptation and innovation as we cope with the changes brought about by COVID-19 pandemic, which have been with us for over a year now. Through detailed research, students develop critical thinking expertise, as well as effective analytical research and communication skills that are globally sought after and incredibly beneficial. Congratulations to all our students and their advisors for the 5 research papers that will be presented this morning. And I also say congratulations to the papers that will be presented this afternoon by our third year students. For me, you are all winners because I'm sure you learn a lot while working on your research papers. Thank you to the Board of Judges for their time and effort in evaluating these papers and deciding which is the best paper for today. Again, good morning everyone, and may the best paper win. Ad astra per aspera.
Thank you, Dean, for that remarkable speech. Thank you, po. May we now call on the Chair of the Research Center of Development, Dr. Ray Melchor F. Santos, to inspire us to become the better versions of ourselves. A thunderous applause, please. Again, may we now call on the Chair of the Research Center of Development, Dr. Ray Melchor F. Santos.
I'm sorry, I was muted. A very pleasant good morning to all, and thank you very much. I would like to address our Vice President for Academic Affairs, Flora Podichua-san, our Dean, Dr. Ray de los Reyes, our faculty who are with us for this particular affair, and of course our students who are going to present the research output that they have labored on for the past year. This is the 2021 Institutional Research Day, and the Research Center for Development with the help of management, we were able to expand the activity of this Institutional Research Day. Before, it involves only usually the medical students and research papers for medical students. With the support of management and the budget, of course, that they've given us, we were able to expand the activities for this particular Institutional Research Day, so that we're not going to have only the contest for the papers to be presented by the second and third year medical students, but also we're going to have the contest between the different institutions under the foundation at FAU. It is indeed a very important day for all of us, particularly for the Research Center of Development, of which I would like to acknowledge and thank the members of the committee, and specifically the subcommittee on student research, headed by Dr. Melody Matthews, and of course with the able help of Dr. Mac Triangular, they were able to come up with the details of the different activities to be presented in this institutional research day. The RCD has always been supportive of research work, not only among the students, but also among the residents and the faculty. In fact, we have formulated the research agenda itself of FAU, which we patterned to the Philippine research agenda. And these we are trying to disseminate to all sectors, from the students, the residents, the faculty, so the subsequent researches to be done are going to be in alignment with the research agenda. And our purpose for this is to be able to come up with possible research protocols and research activities that we can be able to be proud of. We can publish in journals, we can present in other institutions, not only locally, but also internationally. There have been papers done by our students, by our residents, that have been presented in the international research fora. And we take pride in acknowledging these researchers coming from our institution. So we hope that these particular research activities will be able to stimulate our students, faculties, and residents to come up always with good research papers, even during the time of the pandemic. It's a very crucial period for us. We know it's going to be very difficult, but the committee or the Research Center for Development has always been continuing with our activities to be able to fulfill our obligation to strengthen this pillar of our institution. So we hope that everybody will be really research-oriented. The Research Center for Development will always be there to support you. And the administration, of course, would like to thank them particularly because of the continuing support that they've been giving us, not only financially, but also in terms of stimulating us to continue with our activities despite this pandemic. So we hope you will be able to inspire everybody to continue our research activities. And for future activities of the Research Center for Development, we hope that more and more students, faculty, and residents will be participating. So with this, we'd like to thank everybody for all the efforts that you have exerted to make this activity truly a really successful one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Santos, for that very inspirational message. Thank you, sir.
Now, it's time to meet our panel of judges. Our first judge is Dr. Mel Valerie Cruz Ordinario, a medical oncologist, currently an assistant professor at New Era General University, a hospitalist at the Medical Intensive Care Unit of St. Luke's Medical Center, and a member of Institutional Ethics Review Board at the same institution. She is sub-investigator of clinical trials, co-authored published and unpublished research studies, and has ongoing mentorship under the European Society of Medical Oncology and research projects with the National Cancer Center in Japan. She has done many researches published in many international medical journals. A few years back, she felt what it was like to be in our shoes, as she graduated from the Far Eastern University Nicanor Reyes Medical Foundation and had her internship at the FU NRMF Medical Center, where she served as the vice president of the RJIO, president of the PGIO, and associate editor-in-chief of the Caduceus. Let us all welcome Dr. Mel Valerie Cruz Ordinario.
Our next judge is Dr. Ryan A. Ebardo, a doctor in information technology. He is a Microsoft certified professional and educator and an Apple certified teacher. He is the executive vice president of Safari Security Corporation, a faculty member of Healthcare Executives Society of the Philippines and Jose Rizal University. He used to be the dean of the School of Computer Studies of Treston International College. When he took up his doctorate in information technology, he was a recipient of a Research Excellence Award. He has done numerous researches published in many international journals. He also did research with international collaboration. Let us all welcome Dr. Ryan A. Ebardo.
Our last judge who will serve as the chair is Dr. John Rob Y. Banta, with a PhD in physics. He is an associate professor in physics at the National Institute of Physics at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, Quezon City. He is currently assigned as the director of the Computational Science Research Center of the College of Science. Dr. Bantang is actively in research with his students on various complexity science modeling and analysis for system dynamics. Their group is interested in various topics, ranging from neuronal tissue and brain, cancer growth, cell transport, signaling network, granular media like sand and rice heap, etc., socio-cultural system, and other realistic dynamical systems. They use complexity tools such as complex network analysis, stochastic modeling methods, cellular automata models, and mean field approaches, among others. Graduates from the laboratory research group go into research and development as well as in various applied fields such as medical physics, AI, IT, and even finance. Let us all welcome Dr. John Rob Y. Banta. For the scoring system, criteria for judging the research contests. Out of the 20 manuscripts from the second year medical students, 5 were chosen for today's event. Judging of papers. There are 3 members of the board of judges. All entries are prejudged and scored according to a set of criteria for the written paper. Each presenter is given 10 minutes to present the paper. Presenter will be notified when they have 2 minutes left, as well as when their time is up. At the end of the 10 minutes, the presenter must end their presentation, finished or not. An open forum is immediately followed each presentation. Each judge is given a maximum of 2 sets of questions to ask the group. Any member of the group can answer the question. Judges will score on the presentation of each paper using another set of criteria. After all groups have presented, judges will be brought to the breakout room to deliberate and decide who will be the winners of the research contest. 3 papers will be chosen to be declared as a winner of the contest. Ties shall be broken by the judges. And meanwhile, 1 intermission number will be presented in the main room. Judges go back to the main room after they have selected the 3 winning papers. For the background of scoring system, the criteria are based on how the students were able to learn how to write the manuscript using the IMRAD format. IMRAD is an acronym that stands for each section in the manuscript, namely the introduction, methodology, results, and discussion. With regards to the criteria of creating the manuscript, 15 points will go to the introduction, 30 points goes to methodology, 20 for the results, 20 for the discussion, 5 for relevance, 5 for originality, 5 for writing style, for a total of 100% for the criteria of judging or grading the manuscript. With regards to the criteria of grading the oral presentation, manner of presentation, 10%. Also, 10% goes to the audio-visual aids. For the open forum, 10 points. For a total of 30% for the criteria of grading the oral presentation. %70 of each group score will be based on the written manuscript, and the remaining 30 will come from their oral presentation.
We now move to our main event for today, the presentation of students' research. After every presentation, there will be a question and answer portion. Any member of the presenting group can answer the questions from our panel of judges.
First presenters are from Section 2G, Group 1, with Dr. Barbara Amity Flores as their advisor. Representing them is Danielle Bello. Danielle Bello, are you there? You can unmute yourself. May I remind you that you have 10 minutes to present. Are you ready?
Yes.
Take it away.
Good morning. Our study is the perception of telemedicine by physicians as mode of consultation during COVID-19 pandemic. Next. As the world started facing the pandemic, different innovations were implemented to continuously provide and deliver healthcare services to the people. The Department of Health issued a joint memorandum stating the guidelines on the use of telemedicine, allowing patients to seek consultation for medical problems while minimizing unnecessary exposure to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Next. Only few are familiar with this approach, however, because of the new normal, telemedicine was now being promoted and utilized. As the country transitioned to this approach of healthcare, both physicians and patients had to learn and adapt. Next. In previous studies, researchers have illustrated the different perceptions in the use of telemedicine for patient consultations. Some describe different difficulties, while others showed satisfaction and perceived ease of use and usefulness of telemedicine to physicians. In the Philippines, studies regarding the effectiveness, challenges, and satisfaction of physicians in telemedicine were still lacking and inconclusive, especially during this pandemic. Next. This study aimed to determine the perception of physicians regarding telemedicine as a mode of consultation in terms of usage, cost-effectiveness, advantages, and challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic. This can help identify the current gaps in telemedicine used in the country and subsequently instigate needed recommendations to address the challenges and maximize the use of telemedicine. This was a descriptive cross-sectional study which included eligible participants who were Filipino, licensed physicians in public or private practice, and those who use telemedicine as a mode of consultation. Physicians who practice outside of Luzon were excluded. Next, for the sampling method, non-probability purposive sampling was used. Respondents were identified through sending letters to different hospitals with known telemedicine programs. Recommendation, referrals, web searching were also utilized. Letter of intent were sent through email to different chosen hospitals to ask for a short list of telemedicine users. From this list, researchers asked for referrals for other possible eligible participants, and referrals from acquaintances and friends were also sought. Next, this was done until the desired sample size was met. Researchers contacted all different physicians through email or social networking sites. Consent forms were sent together with survey questionnaires using Google Forms and distributed via Messenger, Viber, and Telegram from April 5 to April 16, 2021. All respondents were compiled in a Google Drive, which was only accessible to the researchers. Next. A 3-part questionnaire was then used to evaluate the physician's perception. Next, please. Part 1 for use and cost effectiveness with 8 statements. Part 2 for advantages with 7 statements. And the third part for challenges with 6 statements. Each statement was treated as an independent item of agreement or disagreement. Statements that gained 60% agreement or disagreement from the participants were categorized as significant. Next. Using the mean of population proportion, the sample size for this study was 69 physicians who were using telemedicine. Next. For the results, as seen at Table 1 under the demographic profile, the majority of our respondents were female, aged 31 to 40 and 51 to 60. Next, coming from various fields of practice, most of our respondents were from the fields of pediatrics and family medicine, who are mostly practicing within NCR. Next, most of the physicians started using telemedicine only during the COVID-19 pandemic, and majority were affiliated with a private clinic. Next, as seen on Table 2, the platforms that were most frequently utilized were social networking sites, followed by phone calls and text messaging. Next, The results in Table 3 show that in terms of usage and cost effectiveness, almost all agreed that telemedicine was easy to use and navigate and was appropriate given the current COVID-19 pandemic. The majority also believe that the costs of telemedicine are reasonable in terms of its service fees and expenses, whereas more than half of the respondents disagreed that telemedicine increases workload and was time-consuming. Next. In terms of perceived advantages as seen in Table 4, the majority agree that telemedicine can provide access to remote and rural areas and that it can improve patient convenience, while more than half of the respondents disagreed that telemedicine can improve skill and coordination towards patients, improve specialist efficiency, and can give diagnosis and treatment faster. Next, with regards to perceived challenges at Table 5, all of the respondents agreed that the technological problems are one of the disadvantages of telemedicine, followed by limited assessment about the patient's condition, security risk, and physician and patient information, and limited funding. However, the majority of the participants disagreed that telemedicine increases expenditure. Next. Majority of the telemedicine users are from ages 51 to 60 and 31 to 40, in contrast to other studies which stated that recent graduated physicians are likely to be users of telemedicine since they are knowledgeable about the modality. Next, majority of our respondents use social networking sites because of its accessibility and low data consumption. Studies show that most physicians use Facebook as a platform since this application was highly involved in people's daily activities. The results of the study suggested that although the system of telemedicine was not classified as convenient as physical consultations, it has proven itself satisfactory in providing at least an initial step in basic patient care and consultation. Next. In terms of usage and cost effectiveness, the participants perceived that telemedicine was easy to use and navigate because physicians were able to choose an avenue which can match their level of technology acceptance and knowledge which affects their usage of telemedicine. The modality used in telemedicine also affected the ease of use and physician integration in using it as mentioned. Telemedicine was also perceived as appropriate to use given the pandemic because it is an emerging technology that was both useful and innovative, which also limits the risk of COVID transmission because there was no physical contact with the frontliners and no additional exposure in the hospitals. Next. Lastly, the respondents perceive that telemedicine does not increase workload. Despite other studies, participants positively responded in telemedicine's workload. One of the reasons could be they were already well-versed in using different gadgets and the internet, that they only needed less practice. The existing knowledge of using smartphones and other gadgets affected the prejudice in using telemedicine. A study also suggests that physicians may even find comfort and convenience in using telemedicine and may exhibit higher participation and acceptance. Next. With regards to the advantages, the respondents perceived that telemedicine improved patient convenience in terms of lesser travel time, faster diagnosis, health examination, and treatment. Also, the patients can have consultation in their own available time. Studies show that telemedicine provided an avenue for the patient to ask and learn more about their condition, which increased patient engagement, satisfaction, and convenience during telemedicine consultation. Next, the respondents also perceived that telemedicine provided access to remote patients because video consultations such as telemedicine provided faster access to patients in rural areas, where patients' convenience cases that need follow-ups and those coming from far places do not need to go to the hospital and can consult using telemedicine. However, data show that this can be limited to areas with available technology to use telemedicine. Next, on the other hand, physicians disagreed with the following statements. This can be because building connection to the patient and diagnosing through telemedicine was not perceived as similar with face-to-face consultation. In these aspects, telemedicine was not perceived as advantageous. Next, the major challenges perceived in implementing telemedicine were technological problems. Slow internet connection was the most common obstacle that was experienced by the participants in the study. This raised challenges and difficulties for both physician and patient who were living in areas with limited internet access or vulnerable groups who cannot afford such access. Next, another is the limited assessment about the patient's condition, which may be attributed to limitation in physical examination. One of the reasons was that physician can only rely on the physical examination done by the patient with the help of guardian, which makes proper patient assessment limited. Observations of nonverbal gestures were also limited. Another disadvantage was the security risk in physician and patient information due to different work settings, which limit the disclosure to people near or can readily hear what the conversation was about, especially if the patient was in crowded living conditions. Next, lastly, the limited funding for telemedicine was also perceived as a disadvantage. Financial support was still lacking from the government, and actual telemedicine facilities were provided mostly by private institutions. This can be one of the reasons why telemedicine practitioners were mostly from private institutions. On the other hand, the respondents disagreed that the telemedicine increased expenditure. This can be because the majority of the participants used free applications such as Facebook. There was no extra source of expenditure in using telemedicine. They also have limited spending since they stay at home most of the time during consultation. Next. A larger sample size was recommended to ensure a representative distribution of the population of telemedicine users. With a larger sample size, the results can be generalized true and applicable for the whole population. Also, the study focused on the perception of telemedicine during the pandemic. However, there were limited scholarly articles published in relation to this topic during this time. Next. In conclusion, the Philippines studies regarding the perceived use, cost effectiveness, advantages, and challenges of telemedicine during this COVID-19 pandemic were still lacking and inconclusive. Majority of the physician respondents were private practitioners from NCR. Most perceived the use of telemedicine as easy and cost-effective during the pandemic. It also provided access to medical care in remote areas aside from the safety and convenience provided as consultations are done in the confines of the home. However, there were also perceived downsides to its use, particularly internet connectivity problems and possible security risk of patients' medical information. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Danielle Bello, for that presentation. Now, may I request the judges to please unmute yourselves to ask questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Group 2G. May I first entertain question from the other members of the panel, if they have?
Okay, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, Doc.
Yes, Doc.
All right. Okay, congratulations, Dr. Belia, for your presentation. And congratulations to the group for this research study. All right. So, one of the questions that we try to answer when we evaluate a research study is, number one, is it socially or scientifically relevant? So I think this study answers that question, especially during this time of the pandemic. And having said that, I actually just have one question. Okay, can I be clarified on the rationale for excluding doctors who are practicing outside Luzon? Because in the methodology, this was done, I think, electronically through Google Forms, email, etc. So I would like to know the rationale for not including physicians practicing outside of Luzon. Thank you.
Good morning po.
Morning po, Doc. Ay. Yeah. Doc, ano po kasi, for Luzon, we chose Luzon since ano po siya, mas accessible po siya for us.
Anong oras? Anong oras pa lang?
Also po, yung, as mentioned in our methodology, one of our participant gathering method is to ask for referral. Sa ngayon po kasi, yung most of our researchers and most of our group mates are coming from Luzon. And it's more accessible po for us to ask referrals from hospitals and physicians who are already practicing po in Luzon. So it is just po to have a concentration po of the study kasi medyo mahirap din po na to spread yung study and knowing na iba-iba po yung condition of telemedicine usage in the other parts of the Philippines po.
Ayan. I think that's another avenue that you can explore later on, to include also physicians practicing outside Luzon and maybe look at the factors that are different between the regions. In hindsight, one of the suggestions or one of the things that you can do to help you with administering the questionnaire or the survey is to seek the help of some societies, right? That so that they can help you distribute the questionnaire. But other than that, I think it is a good study, and thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you po.
Thank you, Doc Mel. Do we have another question from the panel.
Good
Yes,
morning.
Doc.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Dr. Bello, good morning. Congratulations on finishing a study in these challenging times. I feel that telemedicine is, well, it's an emerging technology, especially here in the Philippines. But I'd like to be clarified on some of what you've written in the manuscript. I've noticed you've clustered technological challenges and clustered connectivity with familiarity with as a challenge. Is this correct?
Yes po, perception po on usage and on if they perceive that there's a technological problem.
Okay. And yet, in your responses, one of the top technology that is being used is social media, right? I would assume this would be Facebook Messenger. Okay. Do you think there's a contradiction? For example, because most of us are using Facebook, and yet it appears as a challenge because you've included unfamiliarity with the gadgets. Maybe in the future you can consider separating connectivity and at the same time familiarity, because I don't think they might, cluster well together because they might be a separate dimension. So, kasi it might conflict, like most of the respondents are using social media, okay? Or perhaps recommend in your future directions as the use of social media as a telemedicine platform, okay? Instead of having a more generalized approach in telemedicine, because it might also reveal contradictions. For example, social media, we're all familiar, and yet it might also it appeared that it's challenging. We're not familiar in your research. Second would be, what are you referring to in terms of security risk in physician and patient information? Is this physical security risk or is this privacy? Because it is part of the challenges. Security risk in physician and patient information is increased with telemedicine.
So good morning po ulit. For that statement po, as we seen po in the related studies po or other studies that we've read, one of the factors po na problem in telemedicine is that whenever po a patient is consulting and the environment is not viable po, or there's a crowded environment, there can be a risk po of confidentiality in sharing po. For example po, if a patient is consulting with a family member that's near around, they perceive po, or the study perceive that there's a difficulty in sharing or in consulting po. So that's one of the factors that we look into po with that statement. Thank you po.
How did it become a security risk? Or maybe are you referring to information security?
The whole statement po is security risk in physician and patient information.
Okay. Sige. Okay. So anyways, congratulations on the study. I see novelty in the study because it's pandemic and we don't know when is the next pandemic, and this will transform healthcare industry, especially here in the Philippines. So thank you, 2G.
Can I add lang din po dun regarding sa technological problems that was suggested po a while ago?
Yep.
It was perceived po kasi na yung major problem po can be slow internet connection. Perhaps po if there's a good connection with the physician side, however, dun po sa patient side nila is there is a slow connectivity. It was included po under technological problems. Thank you po.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan Ibardo, for that question. Now, Dr. John Rob Bantang, you may now ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, other judges, for those questions. These are very interesting questions. I would like to follow up with from the question of Dr. Ryan. Which part of your questionnaire was did you get the idea of the difficulty in terms of privacy? So how did you get that information from your respondents? That's my first question. So was there an item or part of the questionnaire that elicited those suggested difficulties?
In our study po, there's a part po in our study that is under challenges. It was listed po as a statement if they perceive that there's a security risk in terms of physician-patient information po. So majority of the participants answered agree.
Did you get a detailed answer, like when they agree? Did they present any samples of such difficulties?
Unfortunately po, it's one of the study's limitation. It's only limited po if the participants agree on this or disagree on the statement. Personal anecdotes po were not listed.
All right. And then it also, I also noticed that 50% of your respondents come from NCR, and they understand that is because of the purposive sampling, and that's because of, it's the most convenient way of sampling, especially this time, no? My question is, if or had you have more samples from the rural areas, do you think your result will be different? And why?
For us po, we think that it can be nearing po with the results because one of the advantages that was mentioned po is that there's an easy accessibility from the people who are from the rural areas. So one of the studies po that we read is that it is really helpful po for the patients who are coming from the rural areas to just do telemedicine instead of going to the hospital po. So I think it's nearing po to the result. However, it can increase the response po from the challenges part. So because po the rural areas can have more problems and also have limited funding po for telemedicine. Thank you po.
Lastly, can you give a comment on, at least for the government leaders, in terms of the implications of the results of your study?
We failed to include po yan kasi po due to the time limit we were constrained. However, it was we were able to write that DOH promoted po the use of telemedicine. However, there are limited funds. If there is more funding for this program, it is also concentrated in the National Capital Region. So the people who are more on the rural side or far from NCR, they are using their own resources. They are using their own resources po to use telemedicine. So this is one of the reasons why we think that most of the practitioners are coming from the private clinics and instead of using the public facilities. So we hope that as we implement or as we recommend this memorandum of using telemedicine, there is also an appropriate funding for this to be applicable to all Filipino people. Yun lang po. Thank you.
That's a good. The challenge is really not just having those equipment, like for example you have your video or your even internet, no, but the real problem or challenge for us is to make everyone connected, especially in the rural areas. And that connection is not, I think, not just the OH problem, but also other agencies in the government. Kasi iba yung naglalatag nung kable, iba yung nagto-turn on nung kable, iba yung nagbibigay ng capacity for them to connect to those cables. No? So bukod dun sa DOH, I think we also have to consider other factors. Besides the fact that even some physicians have also difficulty, as you have reported in your research. Okay, so thank you very much, group. Congratulations.
Thank you po. Thank you.
Thank you, judges, and congratulations, Section 2G, Group 1, with Dr. Barbara Amity Flores as their advisor.
Next presenters are from Section 2C, Group 1, with Dr. Polly Chua Chan as their advisor. Representing them is Kyra Dimalanta. Kyra, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, just put you on spotlight. There you go. You have 10 minutes to present. The floor is now yours.
Good morning. Our paper is entitled A Systematic Review of SARS-CoV-2 Mutations in Relation to its Pathogenicity. Next. Since the emergence of COVID-19 due to SARS-CoV-2, the number of cases across the world has increased dramatically. Further studies are necessary to monitor the constantly evolving virus, and these studies contribute to better recognition of their function and monitor the spread of emerging outbreaks. Studies regarding how mutations affect the virus's pathogenicity is still lacking. Next. Our objective is to conduct a systematic review on different mutations to obtain an understanding of mechanisms of the virus and determine the mutations' effect on its pathogenicity and mortality. And the significance of the study is the establishment of reference for the pathogenicity of different SARS-CoV-2 mutations, which could benefit both the biological study of the virus and the diagnosis, monitoring, and treatment of the infection in the future, as well as the possible development of vaccines and curative medications in general. Next, for our methodology, our eligibility criteria, we included case studies and ecological studies that discuss the pathogenicity and mortality of COVID-19 and its mutations. Randomized controlled trials were excluded, and journals limited to the English language were included. Limited to the English language, and no restriction regarding publication status. For our criteria for participants, we included those who were diagnosed with COVID-19 regardless of their age, sex, and ethnicity, presented with a positive RT-PCR result for SARS-CoV-2, and were identified to have available genome sequence data and with a description of clinical course of illness. Next, for our study inclusions, we included studies that discuss and compare how the strains differ from the reference Wuhan genome, and studies on different populations in Asia, specifically in Wuhan, China, Europe, and North America. And our databases for systematic literature search include PubMed, EBSCO, Science Direct, Frontiers, and WHO. Next, for our search strategy terms, we included COVID-19 mutation pathogenicity and pathogenicity, or SARS-CoV-2 mutation and pathogenicity, and COVID-19 mutation and mortality, or SARS-CoV-2 mutation and mortality. Our risk bias assessment, we utilized the Cochrane risk bias tool, and 3 items were assessed: partial research data, selective reporting, and further additional sources of bias. And every item was assessed from low risk, high risk to unclear. And the overall risk bias of studies included was evaluated. And the study information included the author, year of publication, study design, and discussion that included pathogenicity and mortality in relation to SARS-CoV-2 mutations. Our data items included mutation, which is any deviation from the original Wuhan strain, may be classified based on categories if available, or the sequence. Pathogenicity is the clinical course of the disease classified as mild, moderate, severe, or critical as defined by the National Institutes of Health. Next. This is our Prisma flow diagram. Next. The data have proven that certain variants have developed specific mutations which provided the identification of the changes in its vital structure, and it is labeled according to the viral structures that were affected due to the variant's own mutation. The categories were spike protein, nucleocapsid, phosphoprotein, NSP, ORF, and microRNA. Next, the first category is spike proteins, which mediate invasion of the host cell by binding to the angiotensin-converting enzyme receptors. Next. Spike protein mutations include D614G, which is an aspartic acid to glycine substitution mutation on codon 614, characterized by a higher viral load, enhanced pathogenicity, and increased transmissibility. N501Y is an asparagine to tyrosine substitution mutation and at amino acid position 501, resulting to a higher transmissibility and immune escape. Next. B117 is a substitution of glutamate which increases pathogenicity and transmissibility. This affects PCR results by impairing the detection of the S gene. And other spike protein mutations involve changes in the said mutations result to the positive value of the binding free energy that increases the infectivity of the virus. Next, the next category is microRNA point mutations affecting the virus's pathogenicity, and viral microRNAs are critical in the immunization mechanisms which can affect host immunity-related gene regulation. Next, microRNA mutations include MIR8066, which is found to be associated with the cytokine storm in COVID-19. Other microRNA mutations are associated with the host response against the virus and its pathogenesis in the host cells. Next, ORF. ORF3A is the reduction in the B cell epitope intensity is suggestive of an immunization and immoderate cytokine storms, which are associated with an increase in mortality rate. And ORF7A is able to assist the virus in immune evasion in killing of the infected cells once viral replication has been completed. Next, ORF8, large deletions increases the opportunity for transmission, and gene deletion results in less severe clinical course but increases the possibility of transmission. ORF10, deletions to its heme protein suggest a role for virulence and pathogenicity. Next, for non-structural proteins, these are the mutations in the NSP. This slide shows the general effects of each mutation in the non-structural proteins. The NSP mutation has proven that it decreases the immune system activity of its host, therefore increasing the manifestations. The next category is nucleocapsid phosphoprotein, and mutations here were associated with both mild and severe COVID cases. For the D614 variant, significant mutation affects the B cell epitope by enhancing binding and transmissibility, and other nucleocapsid phosphoprotein mutations were associated with mild clinical presentation, while others produce severe manifestations, and such modifications have been found to contribute to the increased pathogenicity of the virus. Next. For other categories, as motif, researchers hypothesized that SARS-CoV-2 is the recombinant of SARS and SARS-like coronaviruses, strains of which regarded with severe human infections. 6 out of 9 recombinants affect viral pathogenicity. Next. Genetic polymorphisms, ACE2, being the major viral receptor for COVID-19, have polymorphisms that have an effect on host susceptibility to COVID-19 and greater risk of severe conditions such as H1N1 and H7N9 influenza and other respiratory disorders. It can also affect the immune function of the host as well as the repair mechanisms of the lungs. Next. Hotspot mutations in nucleotide sequences, GGG to AAC mutation, and CT point mutations were hypothesized to gain advantages during active viral replication. 10 mutations were found in 80% of the viral genomes, leading to amino acid exchanges in areas where replication is significant. Next. The implication of mitigation efforts and quarantine measures. Quarantine measures were implemented and are targeted in controlling the rate of which the virus spreads. Speed and scale of mitigation efforts are key to controlling the growth of the virus. Researchers have directed their efforts in developing treatment targeting the receptor binding domain in the spike proteins, using the virus's pathogenic features to create vaccines that will address the concerned parts of the virus themselves. Next, according to WHO and CDC, the more a person interacts with different people and the longer and closer the interaction, the higher the risk is of COVID-19 in spreading. Efforts that attempt to prevent the spread of the virus have been implemented globally, which are mass screening, social distancing protocols with contact tracing, limited closure of leisure facilities, educational institutions, and isolation of confirmed cases. Attention should be given to individuals with highest risk of contracting infection. Next. For the potential implication of interventions and vaccines, next, due to the detection of new variants of SARS-CoV-2, concerns about potential virus escape from the immunity given by vaccines have been raised. According to the WHO, changes in the virus should not make vaccines completely ineffective, and protection against the new variants from the currently approved vaccines is still expected, as these can elicit a broad immune response. Next, for our limitations, our study is focused on the effect of mutation in terms of its pathogenicity, and new variants affect the vaccine development in terms of efficacy. Proportion of cases in various segments across population, testing priorities, and vaccination protocols differ in each country. Next, for our conclusion, our study and results show that mutations affect the pathogenic mechanisms of the virus, which results in varying effects on transmission, pathogenicity, and mortality. However, the exact mechanism of viral replication still remains uncertain. Therefore, future research should continue to explore on developing mutations of SARS-CoV-2 in relation to its pathogenicity, since the virus is continuously emerging. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kyra de Malanta, for that presentation. Now, may I request the judges to please unmute yourselves to ask questions? Will Dr. Ordinarius start the Q&A po?
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Doc.
Thank you, Dr. De Malanta, for your presentation. Again, congratulations to the group. I actually learned a lot while reading your research study, no? So I just have a few technical comments, and this is based on the criteria, all right? So it was mentioned in your methodology that you use the Cochrane risk bias tool to evaluate the risk bias, right? And it was supposed to be classified as low risk, high risk, etc. But I'm not sure if it was mentioned in the paper what was the overall risk bias score. It wasn't also clear who evaluated these studies. Okay, so lahat ba ng researchers or may naka-assign lang na 2 or 3, and then if may disagreement, saka lang papasok yung ibang part of the group, all right? It wasn't also mentioned in the paper. Maybe you can give some clarification on this. It wasn't mentioned in the paper how the publication bias was addressed, the risk of the bias within the studies and across all the studies, right? So these are just a few comments, and I think it would further emphasize the burden of the disease in the introduction part if you were able to include the current total number of cases and the mortality rate, at least for the time of the manuscript writing, the latest data, all right? So again, to repeat, what was the overall risk bias? How was the publication bias addressed? The risk of the bias within the studies and the risk of the bias across the studies. So those are just my comments. But congratulations to the group. It was a very good research topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ordinario. May we have Dr. Ebardo, if he has any questions?
Hi, Dr. Kyra.
Sorry, can you ask the students to respond to the question of Dr. Ordinario?
Yes po. Good morning. Thank you, Doc, for that question po. First of all, the review of the literatures were done by the members. So we divided the group into 3. So we have our the first group serves as the first reader and reviewer, and the second will do the same but independently. And then any disagreement between the groups will be resolved by a third reviewer. And for the Cochrane risk bias tool, I admit that it was not presented in the paper. However, it was incorporated during the review process. So, as perceived by the reviewers, so far all of the literatures showed low risk of bias. That will be all po.
Thank you for that answer.
Thank you, Mark. May we have Dr. Bardo? Po?
Hi.
Thank you, sir.
Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Kyra, can you go to the Prisma framework that you've shown, if you don't mind? Yeah. Okay. So, first, congratulations, because systematic literature review is quite difficult to conduct, especially it's during challenging times. And I like systematic reviews because it presents the state of the art of a specific discipline. But I'd like to be clarified on the following, because you claim that you use Prisma. May I know if you've used the 2020 checklist of Prisma?
Yes po. We use the Prisma P protocol from the website po.
Okay. So how many items were actually applied out of 20?
For the most part po, we follow the protocol po, and although I'm not sure how many, but for the majority we follow the Prisma P protocol po.
Okay. Do you have per item and then you check it? So, for example, item 1, I identify the report as a systematic review. Check. Then item 2, see the Prisma 2020 for abstract checklist. Check. Okay. For example, 10A, list all defined outcomes for which data. So did you do this, or you just follow the framework to guide you?
Yes po, we follow the framework po. And since we are we are tasked to go into the website and see the checklist ourselves po, then also.
Okay. So I'm asking this because if you will be publishing this in a journal, because I see potential, journal editors will be looking for the checklist as an evidence that you indeed conducted the Prisma checklist. For this to be published, so of course I want this to be published when it's highly citable. Okay, so and also going back, let's go to title and abstract screening. So you excluded unrelated topics, correct? So the total number of excluded items are 38. Is that correct? Or this is the duplicate? Okay, so this is the duplicate. So, tama? Lester?
No po. Bali yun, from the total were 96 actually, and then the duplicates were removed. That's about 90 na lang po. And then for the screening po of title and abstract, we removed 38 unrelated topics and another one for assessing the eligibility po.
So the total number of included papers are how many?
For the final synthesis po, we had 51 papers.
Okay. So you assess for eligibility, excluded 1, and then it's still 51.
I'm sorry for the diagram, but 52 were we removed already the 38, and for 51 po, we already removed 1 po.
Okay. Sige. Follow-up question also, because the first evaluator also asked about eligibility. So it has to be cleared in the manuscript. How did you appraise a specific literature? So you had a good answer, because maybe you have one researcher evaluating if a paper should be excluded or included, and then another researcher either agreeing if that should be included or included. So that is important in order for you to establish validity in your systematic review. But overall, good job. There are sections to improve, okay? But my recommendations are just for this paper to be, ready for journal submission and publication. So good job, 2C. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Dr. Bardo. May we have Dr. Bantang, please?
Yes, thank you. I would like to ask about you have presented several effects of such mutations. Transmission, effect on transmission, effect on pathogenicity, and as well as mortality. Of the three, transmission and pathogenicity appears to be the rather effect on the viral behavior, and mortality seems to me to have many meaning. Can you clarify that again for me, please? Thank you. What do we mean by mortality on those effects? That's what I'm asking, actually. You're on mute.
For the pathogenicity po, we are concerned about the clinical course of the disease. Meanwhile, mortality is related to the number of deaths with regards to COVID-19 infection po.
Thank you. So, because usually viral infection also is dependent on, or the effect of the viral infection is also dependent on the host. Can you give a comment on the effect? I mean, when you say that these are majority of the possible cases in the future, given all the emerging variants, you're assuming that your hosts are the same, but given different countries and given that these studies are taken from different samples, can you give a comment on how it will affect, given that you have variations of hosts as well? Do these references that you have reviewed mention anything about the capability of this mutation in a specific race, for example, of people or blood type or sort of thing?
Yes, sir. Regarding po sa effects po ng virus na to in different race or country, it will depend po una po sa immune system ng host, kung strong po yung panlaban niya or hindi. Pangalawa po, yung kanilang mitigation protocols kung paano po nila i-control yung virus. As we all know, may mga countries na kaya nilang i-contain yung virus, knowing that they have low infectivity, low cases in compared sa iba. And pangatlo po, yung kanila pong development, kung paano po nila, bukod po sa mga mitigation protocols like social distancing, bukod po doon, kung ano po yung mga developments like vaccines and medications, drugs, na pwede po nilang i-apply sa patient to manage yung, hindi lang yung curative side nito, kundi yung pag-contain ng virus na hindi na mag-evolve pa sa further strains sa ibang tao. So, yun po.
Okay, thank you. The last one is actually a comment. You did an extensive study, and it's quite difficult actually to have this number of papers. You have to read all these papers and focus on a specific effect, cause and effect relation, say. And as a reader, I would really like, I suggest, because I would really like to find a table that summarizes all those studies that you have. Say, for example, a kind of the effect, a general kind of effect or category of an effect, like on a transmission, as you've mentioned earlier. Perhaps if you have that table, then this paper will be highly cited because it's easy to read, not just a narrative that you have shown or you have written So that's my suggestion. If you have that, I guess all the studies will be very easy to read. I'm sure there are similar studies as well about just a review, and they also give quite a summary. Another thing is maybe you can also put in a detail of how many references actually studied on this particular variation, so that we will know which part of this needs more study in case this becomes more interesting in the future. Thank you very much. Congratulations as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, judges, and congratulations, Section 2C, Group 1, with their advisor, Dr. Polly Chua-Chan.
Next presenter from Section 2D, Group 1, with Dr. Laila Reyes as their advisor. Representing them is Rona Fernandez. Rona, are you there?
Yes, good morning po. So good morning, everyone. Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yes po, I'm ready.
Okay, so your time starts now.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, especially to our judges, professors, and fellow aspiring doctors. We are from Section 2D1, and our research is about medical students' perception towards virtual learning environment according to dominant personality trait. So for the introduction and background of the study, next. In light of the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic, abrupt changes in learning modalities affected medical school institutes. The curriculum of medical schools, which in the past relied heavily on on-site learning, has now opted to use a virtual learning environment. A more diverse set of personality traits are present in the VLE student population since it has become necessary to continue one's education amidst the pandemic. As medical students are now comprising this population, it is important to understand the different types of dominant personality traits and their perception towards VLE, as it may be a future indicator of the overall success of integrating VLE into medical academia. Next. According to Ferrari et al. And Keller et al., the impact of a student's personality trait on their perception is one of the factors affecting the success of VLE curriculums. With 5-factor model personality trait, Mustafa et al. Emphasizes that giving weight to personality trait in medicine program is important as having excellent academic results. However, the perception of the students towards learning were not taken into consideration. Next, on the contrary, Bagat et al. Determined the relationship between both distinct personality traits and perception of each student, and indicated that 5-factor model personality trait truly influenced the participants' perception in online learning. In a study by Orvis et al., 5-factor model components such as conscientiousness and extraversion were the basis of some students' preferences in online learning. Next, for the significance and purpose of the study, majority of the previous studies were done before the pandemic, and the population were mostly non-medical students. In our study, all 5-factor model traits of each medical student and how this contributes to their perception towards VLE were examined. There seemed to be a particular trait that stood out among the 5-factor model traits, and thus, this study aims to determine that specific dominant personality trait of medical students and their perception towards VLE. So for the methodology, a descriptive cross-sectional study design was utilized to describe the medical students' dominant personality trait and their perception towards VLE. The sample population were second and third year medical students of FEUNARY MEF who have at least 33 units and were currently undertaking a VLE for the second semester. Using a sample size calculation based on the previous study, as a minimum of 166 participants were needed. But in our study, there were a total of 200 eligible respondents. This was after the application of both the exclusion and the withdrawal criteria. Those whose dominant personality trait was equal to or less than 5% from the second highest personality trait were withdrawn from this study in order to elicit one dominant personality trait per participant. Next, this study employed a purposive sampling A survey in a Google form was used as an instrument to gather responses. Informed consent were given prior to survey with their affixed signature. It was disseminated via Facebook Messenger through each year level's class representative. The data collected consisted of 3 parts: the general data, the dominant personality trait, and the perception to VLE. The instrument used were the mini IPIP to determine the dominant personality trait and the student perception model to determine the student's perception towards VLE. Data were encoded and processed in Microsoft Word Excel sheet, and descriptive statistics were included as shown in the slide. Next. So for the operational definition of terms, the dominant personality trait was operated on the basis of only one leading trait that exceeds the second highest by 5%, which would have elicited one of the following: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And the participants' perception towards VLE referred to the medical students' tendency to think negatively or positively about VLE. This is evaluated from a student perception model. A positive VLE perception meant that the participants' total score was equal to or was greater than 50% per domain, as well as equal to or greater than 50% of their overall perception score. In contrast, a negative VLE perception meant that the participants' total score was for a negative VLE perception meant that the participants' total score was lesser than 50% per domain, as well as lesser than 50% of their overall perception score. Next, for the result, a total of 343 responders were included in the analysis, 143 of which were withdrawn due to having more than one personality trait, leaving a total of 200 eligible participants. Out of these students, a little over half composed of second years. And on the right side of the slide are the personality traits of the respondents, arranged from the most common, which is agreeableness, to least, which is extroversion. Next. Well, this table just shows the exact number of the said respondents' personality traits, with agreeableness comprising of 79 out of 200 participants. Next. As for their perception towards VLE, this table represents the number of those with positive and negative perception, wherein majority of the student is observed having a negative perception. Next. The next table will show the distribution of the dominant personality trait according to their perception towards VLE. Agreeableness and conscientiousness are the most common dominant personality trait that show positive perception. Next. Lastly, this table just shows the distribution of personality trait according to year level among those who have positive perception. For both the second year and the third year medical students, agreeableness and conscientiousness were the more common dominant personality trait, and it was noted that none of the students having openness as a dominant trait had a positive perception on VLE. Next, for the discussion, after the results, we emailed infographic to each respondent containing resulting dominant personality trait. Out of all the 5-factor model trait that were represented in our sample population, the most common dominant trait was agreeableness. This is characterized by flexibility, tolerance, and cooperation with other people. Since the medical field is a place of collaborative work between different specialties in a fast-paced environment, it is no surprise that we see a predominance of people that display a trait that would allow them to adapt to such an environment. Next, following agreeableness was conscientiousness. Next, these people reported being organized, responsible, purposeful, and strong-willed. This trait aims to attain a high level of success through purposeful and consistent planning throughout their studies. Again, it is consistent with other studies showing that this trait is more likely to be found within the medical student population. Next, the third most common dominant personality trait was that of neuroticism. It is defined to exhibit emotions such as depression, frustration, irritability, anxiety, and insecurity. In the past studies, neurotic students are more likely to disengage from learning and to seek new experiences, and that these students avoid stress from learning in an unfamiliar situation. Next, lastly, openness and extroversion are also among the traits represented in our studies. So, although they are not as common, openness defined as being open to experiences as well as being broad-minded, curious, and imaginative. While extroversion, next, was defined by being extroversion was defined by being ambitious, active, and interested in other people, assertive, and positive. So as mentioned in the result, all those who displayed this dominant personality trait also reported to have a negative perception towards VLE. Next, for the limitation of our study, the dominant personality trait and perception to VLE from other institutions cannot be generalized, as this study is only limited to FAU Narimef Medical School. In addition, the questionnaire did not explore any other domains that could possibly affect the results. Thus, we recommend to consider measuring the perceptions toward VLE and the dominant personality traits of medical students in different institutions. And the questionnaire should also incorporate feedback regarding user interface and internet connectivity. This study is implicated to adjust how they approach VLE during this pandemic, and this study will also give them an idea of the common dominant personality trait of their students and use them to develop a course outline that will fit for their trait. Factors like demographics of the study should also be considered. As found in our study, we had an overexpression of female samples that may have affected the results of our study. Next, for the conclusion, this study provided descriptive data on dominant personality trait and perception towards VLE of medical students. This study highlighted agreeableness, conscientiousness, and neuroticism as the more common dominant personality trait in the population, while extroversion and openness as the least common ones. Furthermore, the study revealed that the vast majority of medical students, regardless of their dominant personality trait, have a negative perception towards VLE. Nevertheless, among students with positive perception towards VLE, agreeableness and conscientiousness are the most common dominant personality traits.
Thank you, Rona Fernandez, for that presentation. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you, po.
Thank you. Now, may I request the judges to please unmute yourselves to ask questions. Let us start first with a question coming from Dr. Ryan A. Ebardo.
Hi, Rona.
Hello, Doc.
I like the fact that you use Goldberg's 5 personality traits. Okay, so I've actually used that in my prior research. So my first question is, do you think your research was influenced by the current pandemic?
Yes po. We've mentioned that the medical students were now taking online classes po. And that since there were more students that are taking online classes, a more diverse set of personality traits are now present in the virtual learning environment.
Specifically, what trait of the 5-point personality trait?
According to our results, personality traits were the agreeableness, conscientiousness, and neuroticism among the medical students.
Okay. What would be your recommendations for implementers of the virtual learning environment? Can you highlight one?
Good morning po, Doc. To answer that, since with this research, we have already seen what are the common dominant personality traits of the student comprised in the population, the instructors or the professors who are teaching in the virtual learning environment may gear their teaching strategies to accommodate those personality traits. So for example, as we have seen here, the traits agreeableness and conscientiousness are very common in the population of the medical students. So teachers or professors may gear their teaching strategies to accommodate these traits. So for conscientiousness, kasi, in our research, we have seen that they are more inclined to follow the rules if the materials presented to them are organized. So the instructors may present their learning materials in a more organized manner that may attract the participation of these students. So same goes for the other personality traits.
Okay. Very good answer. Thank you. I guess that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ebardo. Now let us hear questions coming from Dr. John Rob Y. Banta.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations to your paper. A qualitative research is quite quite difficult to do, no? And it's good that you have a good number of samples based on your initial computation. Do you think that the number of required sample would increase given the number of possible choices? You have 5 here. Should it be affected, or would it be not? Okay, narinig niyo ba ako?
Hello po.
Okay, good.
Yes, sir. Just to clarify what you asked, that if our sample size, we would anticipate it to be increased if we included like 4th years and 5th years. Is that correct?
That's correct. Since you have more choices, di ba?
Yes po. So for our choice of 2nd and 3rd year was because they used to be face-to-face, and they would know what it's like to shift from that to the 3rd and to virtual online learning. And then 4th and 5th year, their curriculum puts them more likely in the ward, also face-to-face. And so during the pandemic, we weren't sure what their curriculum was, so whether they were also going to have face-to-face or not. So that's why we stuck with 2nd and 3rd. But we would anticipate that our sample size would increase if we included those. But we also had a withdrawal criteria, and we found out through the data collection that the withdrawal criteria actually did limit the amount of those who are eligible. And so we had to, it would increase, but it would also maybe need to take a longer time for us in the data collection to meet our necessary sample size, because we also calculate our sample size based off of our population.
Okay, thank you. In general, most of the results are actually negative, no, in terms of the behavior towards VLE. But we know that the perception is also affected by the type of VLE, like you have Moodle specifically. Is that correct for all your participants?
Yes.
Now, Moodle is an open source and customizable. It depends really on how the customization is made. So perhaps you can also explain the difference of the customization that was done. Did you do any study comparative? Say, for example, at least comment on how it's different or similar to other VLEs. In the University of the Philippines, we also have this UVLE, UVLE. But I don't know if the VLE that you're talking in your research is very similar to us because of the customization. So maybe you have to give some elaborations on that, because the difficulty can also be related to that. And then, so can you give a comment at least?
Yes, po. So we did mention in our limitations that we realized that was a factor when we were thinking about the different schools. Since we were limited to FEU and RMAF, we realized that other schools have different modalities of virtual learning environments, and maybe there was also a possibility they could have already had a more integrated virtual learning environment. So we did not include that, and so that was a limitation of our study. And it would be a good recommendation to find a questionnaire or create a questionnaire that also puts that into account with different domain factors, and also things like Wi-Fi connectivity and all of those other factors.
And also the other factor would be how well the teachers are actually prepared and how good their preparations are. Did you include that as a factor?
No, sir. This was based off of the perception of the students towards the curriculum and their reactions towards it. So it was also not a factor.
Okay. How long has been the VLE used in the school? I mean, how long have you been practicing using VLE? At least for your respondents and for the teachers of those respondents.
The platform has been around for some time, but however, it wasn't a necessity for the curriculum to continue until the pandemic, and so it was abrupt. It was an abrupt change.
So we can safely say that more or less they have the same level of experience so far using VLE, at least majority of the time in their school. Is that correct? That's an assumption essentially that you have to make.
Yes.
My last question is, would the use of sort of something similar to odds ratio increase or make your research better, and why do you think so?
Hello. Hi. Good morning. So in regards to that, we actually used frequency distribution for this kind of study. However, we also try to incorporate a proportion wherein we will balance according to the sample population, the proportion of the third year and second year students. However, we weren't able to implement an odds ratio kind of analysis. However, it would be another good recommendation, and it might affect the results, and there might be a different kind of perception or personalities that may arise if we use that kind of analysis. So I think it would be another good recommendation for that.
That's all from me. Thank you. Congrats again.
Thank you, Dr. Bantang, for that question. Now let us hear questions coming from Dr. Mel Valerie Cruz Ordinario. Doctor?
Hello, congratulations again to the group. This is actually very interesting yet underrated topic for research studies, especially in the medical field, right? Most of my questions were actually already answered. But just to reiterate, so the first one is, I think it was asked a little earlier, the significance of knowing one's personality trait. I think it would be better to further emphasize this in your introduction. All right, the significance of one's personality trait, knowing the personality trait and its effect on the virtual learning environment platform. And then the other one is the rationale on limiting the participants to second and third year students only. I think it would be also best to include that in your paper, right, to explain that further. Okay. Okay, so for my next question, I would just like to be clarified on this statement. It's mentioned in the introduction part. A more diverse set of personality traits were present in the VLE studied population. May I know can you give a comment on this statement, or maybe give the reference for this statement? In the paper, I think this was written as, with the necessity to stay home due to the pandemic, a more diverse set of personality traits are present in the VLE student population since it has become necessary to continue one's education.
Yes, but I'd like to clarify that statement as say, in the past studies that we were referencing that were not done during the pandemic, one study noted that these participants of online learning, as the term was used, were ones who opted for online learning. They had a choice whether to do face-to-face or online. And that was unique to this time because as medical students, the curriculum generally is supposed to be face-to-face because it's a very space practical curriculum. But because of the pandemic, it had to be that the people who normally wouldn't be taking this online, which is the medical students majority, they're now part of the online community, or the virtual community.
Okay. Then the next one, are there any studies on personality traits and perception towards VLE done during this pandemic period? I know that in your study you said, I think there are a lack of studies, but are there any particular studies that you should have mentioned in your introduction that was done during this pandemic period?
Good morning po.
Yes.
There was one study which was done in Pakistan in 2020. They determined the perception of medical students on online learning during COVID-19. But we originally planned to take the questionnaires from them, but they failed to respond to our email, so we have no copy of questionnaires. And it's also possible that the questionnaires were in Pakistani, so we didn't include them at all.
Okay. I think you need also to emphasize that in your significance that, there are really a lot, lack of studies regarding this personality traits and the VLE, and that would further strengthen the result of your study, the significance of your study. All right. Next, do you think that there is a need to validate the questionnaires that you used? Because it was mentioned in your paper that it was not validated.
Yes, well, I think there is a need to validate it. But however, there were not much questionnaires that were which is published and validated in the Philippines. So were the ones that the closest that we got, which were applied in other studies.
All right. And in those questionnaires, you also wrote there that online learning was rewarded as VLE. I think if I don't know if the other judges would agree with me, but I think if you're going to use a particular scale, an established scale already, and you would like, I'm not sure if it would be best to reward a part of that questionnaire. All right. So if they used online learning, and then I think you might as well use online learning, and then just clarify it in the either in the informed consent or in the introduction that you will give your participants that online learning in this particular study would mean the virtual learning environment. Okay, and then just a few minor comments. It was also noted in your results that I think there was a word there or a phrase there, a little over half. So this is a result of a research study. So better to put the actual figure or the actual number. And then you may want to consider also using graphs to further illustrate the results of the study. All right? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ordinario, for those questions. And also thank you, judges. And congratulations to Section 2D, Group 1, with their advisor, Dr. Laila Reyes. Dr. Laila Reyes.
Next presenters are my classmates from Section 2H, Group 1, with Dr. Abraham Daniel Cruz as their advisor. Representing them is Caroline Servania. Caroline, are you there?
Yes, I'm ready.
Hello, good morning, classmate. You have 10 minutes to present. Take it away.
A good morning to you all, doctors. We are Group 1 of Section 2H, and I will be presenting a research study entitled Satisfaction of Medical Students of Different Learning Styles to Online Education During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Next slide. The objective of our study is to determine the satisfaction of medical students of different learning styles in terms of organization and structure, learner interaction, student engagement, instructor presence, and perceived learning to online education during the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide. To begin with our introduction, next slide. In March 2020, schools, including medical institutions in the Philippines, were forced to stop the traditional face-to-face learning activities and abruptly shift to online education, wherein it is still unclear whether the original learning outcomes will still be achieved through online learning. Next slide. The findings of this study benefit the students in addressing their satisfaction with online education, how it helps them to better understand and comprehend, with the emphasis on their respective learning styles. Next slide. Our hypothesis is that the medical students of different learning styles are satisfied with the current online education during this COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide. To proceed with our methodology, next. A descriptive cross-sectional study was conducted among the second year and third year medical students of FEU and RMF enrolled in the school year 2020 to 2021. Students chosen as respondents were done through simple random sampling. Medical students who took a leave of absence for the second semester were excluded, and students who could not be contacted during the data collection were withdrawn from the study. Next slide. The sample size was calculated and an estimated sample size of 278 was yielded, and it was maximized to 300 respondents. Next slide. A complete record of the names of all the second year and third year medical students currently enrolled at FEU and RMF during the school year 2020 to 2021 were requested from the year level executive officer of each year. Google Forms containing the informed consent and survey questionnaires were utilized for data collection via social media messaging through Facebook Messenger and Telegram. Next slide. Participants were provided with full disclosure of information regarding the study, the voluntary nature of participation, and the assurance of anonymity and confidentiality of their data. For this research, two questionnaires were included. First, the VARC questionnaire, which determines the participant's learning style, and second, the SLS OLE instrument, which determines their satisfaction with online learning. Next slide. To start with the VARC questionnaire, this questionnaire has 5 categories: the visual, auditory, read and write, kinesthetic, and multimodal. This was determined through a percentage and frequency distribution, and the students selected letters that corresponds to their answers and were counted depending on the number of each VARK letters selected to get the score for each category. Next slide. The highest number obtained from the VARK letters determined the learning style of the respondent. When 2 or more VARK results were equal, they were categorized as multimodal learners. Next slide. The latter part of the questionnaire is a student learning satisfaction in online learning environment instrument, or the SLS OLE, and the outcome measures for satisfaction were categorized into low satisfaction, which is less than 49%, moderate satisfaction, which ranges from 50 to 69%, and high satisfaction, which is 70% or more. Next slide. The outcome measures for satisfaction were categorized into low, moderate, or high satisfaction, depending on the score generated after getting the percentages of the 6 categories, namely course structure and organization, learner interaction, student engagement, instructor presence, and student satisfaction and perceived learning. This study was conducted on a 0.5 level significance. Next slide. To proceed with the results, next slide. The first table shows the learning styles of the second year and third year students of FEU and RMF. A total of 300 respondents were obtained, and majority of the respondents are classified as kinesthetic learners, and the least are auditory and oral learners. Next slide. The next table shows a level of satisfaction in terms of overall satisfaction. The results reveal that the majority of the respondents, comprising of second year and third year students, were moderately satisfied with the overall online learning experience. Next slide. The next table shows the level of satisfaction of different learning styles in terms of course structure and organization. The results show that majority of the students were moderately satisfied under the category course structure and organization. The results show that students classified as read and write learners had the highest percentage satisfaction among all the learning styles. Next slide. The next tables show the level of satisfaction of different learning styles in terms of learner interaction. It shows that most of the respondents were moderately satisfied in their interactions with their respective learners. Students who are classified as visual learners obtained the highest percentage from the high satisfaction level. The next table shows the next slide. Next table shows the level of satisfaction of different learning styles in terms of student engagement. Majority of these learners were all moderately satisfied with their engagement to their co-students, and multimodal learners were the most satisfied out of all the learning styles in terms of this. Next slide. Levels of satisfaction of different learning styles in terms of instructor presence. Majority of the students were moderately satisfied with their instructor's presence during the online learning, and visual learners garnered the highest percentage for this category. Next slide. The next tables show levels of satisfaction of different learning styles in terms of student satisfaction. The students were mostly moderately satisfied with the online learning setting, and majority of the multimodal learners were highly satisfied. Next slide. And the last tables show the level of satisfaction of different learning styles in terms of perceived learning. Majority of the students were moderately satisfied with the learning that they perceived during the online learning setting, and students that were classified as visual learners obtained the highest percentage of being highly satisfied. Next slide. To go on with our discussion, next. Next slide. Using the VAR questionnaire, the results indicated that the majority of second-year and third-year medicine students were primarily kinesthetic learners. This signifies that they were more inclined to lean towards tactile, immersive, and interactive types of experiences. The students with multimodal learning styles were more significant in number than those with single modalities, excluding the kinesthetic learners. And using the SLS OLE questionnaire, the results have shown that most of the students of different learning styles were moderately satisfied with online education. Next slide. In terms of course structure and organization for the read and write learning style, they have understood the instructions and the purpose of the topics more, and they were better hands-on towards the course navigation. For the learner's interaction and instructor's presence, visual learning style, they were more satisfied in their communication with their instructor and received more feedback from their classmates than the other learners. Next slide. In terms of the student engagement, satisfaction, and perceived learning for the multimodal learning style, they were more satisfied with the frequent discussion of what they learned in class together with their other classmates and with their overall engagement in the activities that were required by the course. These students have the advantage to easily adapt to changes due to their flexible learning style. Next slide. In an online setting, learner interaction and student engagement was not maximized as other students did not have the luxury of having a reliable and stable internet connection, leading to missed class sessions. Next slide. Upon further research, several results show that some studies have similar results with our research, and these are the examples. Next slide. Based on David Cope's experiential learning theory, this revolves on the idea that learning can be best achieved through experiences, and this can be a possible explanation as to why the overall satisfaction of the majority of the participants with regards to online learning is only moderate. Next slide. To improve overall satisfaction, ask the students for feedback about the course structure, facilitate a meeting for each section to interact with each other, balance between synchronous and asynchronous lectures, and direct feedback from the professors with regards to homework and progress of groups or studies. Next slide. The limitations of our study is that generalizability is limited. Other factors such as internet connectivity and conduciveness were not discussed, and this does not determine the cause and effect relationship between the variables. And we would further recommend to expand the scope of participants and use correlational studies. Next slide. Thus, to conclude our research, we would therefore conclude that the abrupt shift from face-to-face to online classes affected the satisfaction of the students of different learning styles towards the course. And that is all for our research. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Caroline Servania, for that presentation. Now, may I request the judges to please unmute yourselves to ask questions. May I have Dr. Ryan Ebardo, please?
Hi, who was that again? Sorry. This is 2H, right? Okay, so
yes, sir.
Caroline, congratulations on your research. I like the practical implications because it helps us understand as educators what are the areas we can improve on. Okay? I'd like also to commend the way you presented discussions by relating it with prior studies that have similar results. Okay, so that is the way to go. So you don't just discuss your results, but also align it with prior scholarship. Okay, so good job on that. Do you think that kinesthetic learners, such as medical students like you, have will have a different result if it was not pandemic? Like, because we shifted to virtual learning environment and applied learning, so experiential learning is difficult to achieve in virtual learning environment. Do you think if there was no COVID, the results would have been different?
Good morning po. For us po, yes po. Parang as a medical student po kasi, we have to apply our knowledge and our skills. For example po, during our laboratory sessions, yung lectures namin po, doon po namin siya na-apply. So kung hindi po pandemic ngayon, mas maaalala or mas ma-retain po namin yung knowledge na from lecture, tas nagawa namin from lab. So parang if kinesthetic learners po yung majority, mas maaalala po kasi nila if ginamit nila yung katawan nila, ganun. So, for lab po yun po. For us po, mas maiiba yung results.
Okay. Can you expound on the term multimodal?
For multimodal po kasi, yung meaning namin doon is if, for example po, 2 or 3 learning styles, for example, visual ka and auditory ka, and then yung result mo is equal. For example, both 11 ka doon sa score mo. Doon po kayo magiging multimodal learner. For meaning po nun, equal po yung both learning style na highest score.
Okay. For multimodal learners, what would be your recommendations to teachers like us?
For multimodal learners po, kasi po for iba-iba naman po kasi yung range ng multimodal. And sabi nga po namin dun sa study namin, flexible po kasi yung multimodals. So parang ang recommendation na lang po namin dun is kung ano na lang din po yung magiging recommendation namin for other studies. For example po, for if visual ka and auditory, so pwede pong yung professors mag-send ka ng like lectures na asynchronous, ganon. Kasi po mas maaalala if ulit-ulit naming pinapanood. Unlike if synchronous lang, minsan lang po namin mapapanood if visual ka or minsan mo lang mapapakinggan if auditory ka. So parang kung ano, depende din po kung ano yung pagiging multimodal mo, if visual, auditory, kinesthetic or visual, kinesthetic, read-write, ganun po.
Okay, perhaps additional features in the platform, more interactions that would entice the learners. Okay, so anyways, congratulations. I like the study also. I like the way it was written. It's very scholarly. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ebardo. May we now have Dr. Bantang, please?
Hello, Group H. I would like to follow up on the question of Dr. Ibardo. Actually, it's very interesting question on the multimodal. Did you do any additional statistical analysis on the, say for example, which of 2 characteristics are most common among the multimodal modes?
For the multimodal po, hindi na po. We did not expand na po dun sa range ng multimodal because according to our advisor po, parang no need na po. Parang ang focus lang po kasi namin is kung satisfied talaga yung learning style or not. So hindi na po namin siya in-expand or parang binigyan ng characteristic if VA, VR, VK, VKA, ganun po.
Yeah, the reason why I asked because it seems that both the kinesthetic and multimodal students have have the same result. And I was thinking that maybe, just maybe, majority of the multimodal has kinesthetic as part of the multimode. So in that way, you can do more conclusion, and you can more more recommendations related to that. The other question is, aside from the standard questionnaire items coming from the VARC and the other material, did you include any additional qualitative questions in your material?
No po, Doc, we did not po. Since validated na po both yung questionnaires, hindi na po namin siya parang pinakailaman yung questions na nakalagay doon.
Yeah, because I was just thinking that maybe, as Dr. Ibardo actually has pointed out, maybe there are other factors like wala na kami magawa. Ito na yung available na option that we have. And so the satisfaction level is quite, moderate to high. No, that's one possible conclusion here. Kumbaga, since wala na tayong magawa, this is the only choice we have, we're satisfied. So perhaps that's an additional question, qualitative question that you can ask to clarify their responses. No? And given that they have, kasi wala ka naman yatang question doon sa questionnaire na not satisfied, just less. So we really have to differentiate between, are the results really positive, no? In that regard. Again, I would like to also recommend na siguro mas maganda yung medyo may pagka-odds ratio so that you can more generalize your results, not just for this particular pool of respondents. Yeah, so I think that's all question that I have. Congratulations again.
Thank you, Dr. Bantang. May we now have Dr. Ordinario, please.
All right. I agree with Dr. Ibardo. This research has very good practical implications, and the manner of writing of the paper is actually very good, right? So congratulations. I just have very few questions. Okay. So number one, what is the rationale for including only second and third year medical students in this study?
We included second year and third year only po because sila po talaga yung naka-experience ng shift from face-to-face to online education. So hindi na po namin sinali yung first year students. And for the fourth year po kasi, nagka-clerk na po kasi sila ngayon. So hindi na po kami parang sure if kung ano po yung parang magiging curriculum nila. So sinigurado na lang po namin na yung second year and third year po, sila po talaga kasi yung parang nag-online talaga ngayon. As in online lang sila throughout this sem. Kaya po sila yung pinili namin.
Alright, so also try to include that in your paper as a rationale. Okay? So the next one, and I only ask this because it was mentioned in your paper. How were the privacy and confidentiality of participants ensured in this study?
Yung nakaka-access lang po nung answers nila is yung researchers lang po and yung statistician na gumawa. And then after that po, after nung study, yung ako po as a leader, anong tawag doon? Pinrivate ko na po yung Google Forms nila and everything. Tapos ako na lang din po throughout the whole group yung nakakapag-access dun sa Google Forms nila.
Alright. Also write that in your study, and I'm saying this for the benefit of all the research, of all the groups, all right? In a study with a lot of authors, the danger actually is the assurance of the data privacy. So if madaming authors yung study, no, maraming kasama dun sa study, we usually just assign one or two persons that will have access to coding of the data. Kasi remember, this data would have their names, alright? So dapat meron lang one or two persons, sila lang yung assigned na mag-code. And then the rest of the study team will have access to the data, but some of them will not have access to the names, alright? And that is one way of ensuring the confidentiality and data privacy of your participants. So okay yun na since you are the leader, you were assigned to have, access to the Google Forms. So that's one way of doing it. Another way is yung lock na cabinet, and then only one or two members of the research team will have access to it. Right? So the reason why I asked, because it was mentioned in your study, but for the benefit of all the research groups, all of the data of your participants should you should ensure that there will be data privacy and confidentiality. Okay, so no further questions. Thank you very much and congratulations.
Thank you, judges, and congratulations to Section 2H, Group 1, with their advisor, Dr. Abraham Daniel Cruz. Thanks so much.
The last presenters are from Section 2A, Group 1, with Dr. Eva Bautista as their advisor. Representing them is Catherine Alonzo. You have 10 minutes. Catherine, are you there?
Yes, po.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. The floor is now yours.
So, good morning, everyone. We are Section 2A1. Our advisor is Dr. Eva Bautista, and our research is entitled Education in the Midst of a Pandemic, Distractions in Online Learning Amongst Medical Students. Next slide, please. For the introduction, next slide. The COVID-19 pandemic obligated people to follow strict lockdowns, which forced the educational sector to use an alternative method of teaching, which is online learning. And online learning has been deemed effective with a high satisfaction rate, but it comes with its own challenges, which makes them more vulnerable to distractions. According to the study of Ford and Poljak and Wang and Kloster, these distractions cause a decrease in learning ability that eventually results in poor performance. Previous slide, please. This study seeks to determine the distractions that medical students experience during online classes. This endeavor also attempts to determine which of these distractions are most commonly reported by students. This will in turn provide information on the most common interferences that may impede the ability of a student to maximize the effectiveness of their learning. Next slide, please. For our methodology, next slide, a descriptive cross-sectional study on the distractions of online learning was performed among second-year medical students of Far Eastern University Nicanor Reyes Medical Foundation of school year 2020 to 2021. Students who have familial or marital relationships with the researchers were excluded in the study. The sample size was calculated using the estimated population proportion, with a reliability of 90%, proportion of 80%, and a maximum allowable error of 0.05. The calculated sample size is 173, and anticipating a non-response rate of 3.5%, the final sample size is 179. A database containing the list of second-year students was obtained from the class presidents of each section, and each student was assigned with a designated number. The participants were selected using a random number generator. And after selection, they were contacted via email and provided a brief explanation about the study, as well as an informed consent prior to the survey questions. This was done via an online survey application through Google Forms, and from there, the data was transferred to Google Sheets. Listed in the questionnaire were the distractions categorized into internal, external, social media, work commitments, social commitments, and technical challenges. Each question had a yes or no option, depending on if the participant considered it as a distraction. The participation was purely voluntary, and withdrawal from the study was allowed at any time. Next slide, please. For the results, next slide. 178 participants out of 179 completed the survey, which gave an overall response rate of 99.4%. Majority of the respondents were ages 20 to 25 years old, female, and located in the province. The total number of respondents for each demographic category varies since the options given in the questionnaire were non-mandatory. Next slide, please. Unusual noises were found to be the most common cause of external distraction. This was closely followed by prolonged sitting, home environment, and hearing people conversing. Less common reasons are Zoom fatigue, hot weather, browsing or playing games, and temperature or lighting conditions. Next slide, please. With regards to internal distractions, there was a preponderance of wondering or thinking about other things, followed by a lack of ample amount of sleep to perform academic tasks, feeling of hunger and illness. The less commonly reported are difficulty to stay awake at night or wake up early, constant thoughts of a family member who has a COVID-19, low motivation anxiety, COVID status of the whole family, and resurfacing psychiatric issues. Next slide, please. In social and work commitments, the majority of the participants found difficulty in concentrating due to information overload, followed by thinking about school requirements and submissions. In other commitments, half of the students found it difficult to study due to household chores, but only a few found it difficult to concentrate while having sideline jobs, and the least noted was problems at home. Next slide. And lastly, unclear lecture audio was noted to be the predominant cause of social media and technical distractions. Social media notifications came in second, followed by unclear lecture visuals, screen freezing, Moodle application crashing, unstable internet speed, and attachments that do not open. About half reported jumbled graphics, device shutting off, bandwidth limitations, and rebooting devices. And the least taken note of was power interruption. Next slide, please. Next slide. As shown in the results, the majority of the respondents reported external distractions, particularly those common in home-based online learning settings such as barking dogs or noisy people. These are usually uncontrollable, and the most a student can do is to minimize distractions to a certain extent. The results on internal distractions, on the other hand, were more varied. These wide variations may be attributed to the highly personal nature of internal distractions, unlike in external distractions. The results showed that some experiences like thinking about other things and lacking of sleep due to academics are more common than others such as hunger, illness, having a COVID-19 positive family member, and a psychiatric illness relapse. Next slide, please. For social and work commitments, a little less than half reported distractions due to household chores and small percentage reported difficulties due to side jobs and home problems. Having part-time jobs and home problems is highly personal, and it seems that most do not have either of these or do not find this distracting. According to Junko and Wood, previously, technology itself could be a distraction in an online learning environment. The most frequently encountered technical distraction was difficulty to concentrate due to unclear audio and visuals of lecture, and internet connectivity problems. With the shift to pure online learning, numerous distracting technical difficulties are expected and could be attributed to either bandwidth or device malfunctions. Next slide, please. So for the conclusion, due to COVID-19 pandemic, education has changed dramatically to online learning. However, students who take online classes are exposed to distractions which may alter learning efficiency. Listed here are the following factors identified throughout the study that are categorized into external distractions, internal distractions, social and work commitments, and social media and technical distractions. Next slide, please. For the study recommendations, distractions have been shown to decrease learning ability, which results in poor performance. Given this, the results have important implications on the quality of learning via online methods. While insights that might arise from the data that the researchers gathered, these results still have a potential for future research. This study was done with limited time and number of participants, and so a larger population involving other batches within the medical school, undergraduate students, and even other colleges and universities would provide a more complete picture of perceived distractions among students learning via online methods. And educations and school administrators would greatly help students if they take note of these distracting factors and come up with innovative ways to reduce the impact. And that would be all. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you, Catherine Alonso, for that presentation. Now, may I request the judges to please unmute yourselves to ask questions. Let us start first with a question coming from Dr. Mel Valerie Cruz Ordinario.
Thank you. Congratulations to our last but not the least group, right? So I think this is the last, right? I like your presentation. It was very well timed, okay? And I like also your statement that it has important implications, in the quality of online learning, okay? So having said that, You mentioned there that we can use this study to come up with innovative ways of improving online learning. So can you recommend or suggest some ways, maybe one or two ways by which we can apply the results of your study in the improvement of the quality of online learning?
Hello po. One of the suggestions that I thought of after this was, since yung most commented or most voted na answer was yung unusual noises, and those were the unusual noises were either dogs or dogs barking, construction noises. I feel that for one thing that the teachers could do to help eliminate that is, since most of those dogs or construction noises happen during the day, maybe if they were to post more video lectures, students could watch the lectures in the evening when there aren't any more noises coming from the outside of their house, para mas quiet yung environment kasi usually at nighttime. So maybe more video lectures would help.
Parang additional asynchronous way of learning.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else?
Doc, we also thought that since many also indicated that unstable internet problems as well as Moodle app crashes were common. This is also another reason for more asynchronous classes. I think it's Centro Escolar University. I could be wrong about this, but I heard that they conduct synchronous classes only around 2 to 3 times per week, and the rest is asynchronous. So this would really help students in Zoom fatigue or with Moodle app crashes, and especially those who are relying on mobile data and not on Wi-Fi.
All right. Thank you for your answer. I actually learned from this study because I also teach, and I thought na ayaw ng student yung ganon, yung may extra additional time for asynchronous learning. So that is a good outcome of this study. All right. Another question is, let me see. If you can summarize among of the categories, because there are a lot, I think there are 5, no? What is the most distracting among the students? Is it the internal, external, social media work commitments, social or technical? Meron ba sa kanila yung talagang glaring distraction? Yeah. Which of the distractions mentioned mostly affects the students in general?
Doc, I would say it's mostly the external as well as the technological problems.
Okay. Can you comment on the study population and how it may affect the results of the study? Because most of the students are female and most of them are in the province. So do you think it will have an impact on any of the categories that of distractions being evaluated?
I think yes, both, because as we all know, guys and girls don't always have the exact same problems, but also being in the province and being in the city may also have different problems leading to electrical outages or connectivity issues.
All right. Maybe you can also include that in your discussion and maybe include again some of literature to cite the possible differences between male and female students and those who are living in the province and in the city, right? So I think I don't have any more questions. Thank you very much, and again, congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Ordinario. Now let us go on to Dr. John Rob Waibantang. Doctor.
Thank you. This is a very interesting study. In fact, in the University of the Philippines, it was actually found out that most of our students want synchronous synchronous sessions. The reason for this is because of I don't know, maybe more students wanted to see their classmates. They want more interactions with their teachers, and perhaps this is unique. No, your result is unique to the medical students because in Diliman, most of our students are more of the engineering and sciences. Now, same as the previous question, I would also be interested, in fact, of how the how are the respondents differentiated in terms of their location. I know that in the province, the role are quite different. Maybe you have more house chores in the province than here. Here you can always order food somewhere, right? In Metro Manila. Also in the provinces, the gender role is more pronounced as opposed in the city. So perhaps it could also affect. And it would be interesting if you can do a more, you presented a cross-sectional nga na that what is there a difference in the distribution of the distraction for female and for male as well as for the location in terms of differentiation in location. I was looking for these results, but I seem not to find it. Let me look at. Okay, now my question is this: in your survey instrument, did you include operational definition in your different types? Like, for example, the internal distractions. There should be definitions there for them to say that they are really distracted by this particular item. Did you put any definition?
Anybody from section 2A would like to answer the question?
I don't think that we did food. We just classified them under certain categories for the survey.
So you mean you just placed the term, like for example, one term is you just said unusual noises. It's just that the item there is labeled like that. Or say wondering, thinking about things, walang description or nilagay nyo. It has to be qualified. Like for example, if I am wondering, thinking about things, we usually do that even in the regular classroom. And it has to be qualified whether I did really wonder when I thought of it like in one moment. Now, for some people, it's already wondering, but technically, is it for your study? It has to be there. In any case, if it's not there, it has to be taken into consideration, especially in your recommendation, perhaps. You can put it there. And then with regard to lack of ample amount of sleep, so all these things, they have to be qualified. Like how many sleeps do you mean by ample amount? No, for some people, ample amount means having maybe 5 hours of sleep, but for others, 8. They require 8 for themselves. So maybe you should have cited, I don't know, WHO or DOH recommendation for such, as well as for all the others. Maybe the last statement I can give is a recommendation. You placed certain items where there are only one respondent. You could present it as a pool instead of enumerating them one at a time. Since anyway, halos insignificant na yon kasi tag-iisa na lang sila. So parang na lang, trailing factors na lang yon. So you could group them together. For all the others, this, etc. So they are part of the etc. So that would be a better way of pooling them. And perhaps you can also improve on this by categorizing these items. Maybe you can generalize it more into more common items. So that's all. Congrats. Medyo mahirap din kasi yung ganito because it's highly qualitative. No? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bantang. Now let us hear questions coming from Dr. Ryan A. Ibardo. Doctor?
Okay. Is this 2A correct?
Yes,
Yes po.
I agree with the other panel members. It's timely that we conduct and check what are the distractions from the perspective of the students, because I believe they are the primary stakeholders of the virtual learning environment that we suddenly shifted to this pandemic. So I have some questions. Can you explain why did you use a yes or no questionnaire as opposed to a Likert scale?
Doc, we used a yes or no questionnaire because we were focusing on on the number of students who identified with these problems or complaints. Whereas if kung Likert scale po kasi may gradations na po kasi yun, 'di ba? And I think that might be subject for further study, like how distracted are you or how not distracted are you. But for our study, we focused first on what the students identify and how many identify with these distractions.
Okay, so do you think it would be interesting to measure the magnitude of a distraction rather than just asking whether it is a distraction or not?
Well, yes, sir. It's good. It's better to measure the degree or the magnitude of distractions, and that would be in our further recommendations, sir, for further study.
Okay, what is the basis for listing the distractions? Did you have a literature to back up that this specific distraction is internal, external, social media, and social and work commitments?
In the review of literature, we did find similar distractions in other studies. May na-identify po kasi sa ibang studies na yung mga cellphone use or yung mga sneezing, katulad po nung sinabi sa, I think that was Zimmer and Foxtree in 2013. They identified distractions like sneezing and laughter. So, yan po.
And do you think this is applicable in the pandemic era?
Well, yes, sir, because students are now staying at home and they're surrounded by their neighbors and their family members and not in their dorms or in libraries.
Okay. Thank you. Lastly, going to table number 3, you had internal distractions, right? Okay, so there are some questions there that I feel are correlated with each other. For example, if you have illness, most likely you would have anxiety, right? Because I think most of us are paranoid, okay? Or if you have a household who tested positive, most likely you will have resurfacing psychiatric issues or low motivation and anxiety. So what I'm trying to say is that maybe in future research, maybe conduct a validity and reliability of the survey instrument so that we can specifically measure a dimension. Okay, so some questions there kasi might lead to another. So therefore, yung validity or discriminant validity of the questionnaire can be put into question. But overall, thank you for the research. So I learned a lot. Good luck on your future publication in the awards, and thank you to A.
Thank you, Dr. Ibardo. Thank you, judges. And congratulations to Section 2A, Group 1, with their advisor, Dr. Eva Bautista. And that concludes the presentation of students' research. Next slide, please. The judges will now enter the breakout room to deliberate.
While the judges are deliberating, our very own Power Stroke has prepared an intermission number. As the official dance organization of FEU and RMF, they are composed of medical students from all levels who are continuously expressing their passion while pursuing their dreams. Nabbing fourth place at APMC's MedGroove MedRhythmia 2020, this group is committed to represent the institution and uphold its standards in the field of medicine, both in the hospital and on the dance floor. Once again, this is Power Stroke. We apologize for the technical difficulties.
Better is a moment that I spend with you than a million other days away. I'm running to the secret place. Where will you run, my soul? Where will you go when wells run dry? When the wind starts to blow, how you gonna keep this flame alive? In the fade, like when night is breaking, I know you will
Thank you for that meaningful performance, Power Stroke. What a way to show that the medical students of the Far Eastern University Nicanor Reyes Medical Foundation are not just smart, but also well-rounded individuals.
Before we announce the winners, we would like to acknowledge the following people for making this event a success. Mr. Joaquin Jose L. Reyes Jr., the Chief Information Officer of FEU-NRMF.
Mr. Russell John G. Murillo, the Information System Specialist.
Vanessa Kate Alvarez and Power Stroke for the intermission number.
Martina Dominic R. Reyes for the PowerPoint presentation.
Roseni Camille G. Tuazon for keeping the time.
The committee members of the Research Center for Development of FEU-NRMF, headed by Dr. Ray Melchor F. Santos as the chairman.
Dr. Polly T. Chua Chan, the Vice President for Academic Affairs.
Dr. Macario F. Riandilar, the chairman for the Technical Review Committee.
Dr. Milagros F. Neri, the chairman for Institutional Ethics Review Committee.
Dr. Angelito L. Alejo, the chairman of the subcommittee on the residence research.
Dr. Dolores V. Villarad, the chairman for the subcommittee on faculty research.
Ms. Jasmine De Goleado Acosta, the chairman of the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee.
Mr. Robert Paul S. Lim, the chairman for the subcommittee on Animal Care and Use Program.
Dr. Policarpio Hoves, the chairman for the subcommittee on publication and editor-in-chief of the FEU-NRMF Medical Journal.
Dr. Leona Melodia T. Matthews, the chairman for the subcommittee on students research.
And Ms. Rachel V. Tolentino, the administrative staff of the Research Center for Development. May we now call on Dr. Macario Riandilar, the course coordinator of research and the chair of the Technical Review Committee, to give us his closing remarks. A round of applause, please.
We have come to the conclusion of this event, the event that is truly student-centered and student-driven. And you, my dear students, have proven to your professors, to us, you are worth our time being with you. I think my colleagues will agree with me that you have almost excelled in this endeavor that the administration has for so long wanted to achieve. The culture of research in FEU, in RMF, it being part of our vision statement. This event, I would like to believe, is a fulfillment to that dream. And it is worth noting that in the forefront of this endeavor are you, my dear students, who almost single-handedly operated, managed, directed this event to make it happen, and happen as it did successfully. Especially thank our delightful and articulate MCs, Amadeus Plete, Mark Fernandez, the amazing Vanessa Alvarez and her companions in the Power Stroke, who gave an astounding presentation to entertain us all, to the innovative Nika Tuazon, who willingly works even without prodding, and to the most hardworking Martina Reyes for her generosity to lend us her time and talent, working even during the weekend only to finish and share the slide presentation. To Rachel Tolentino, the ever-reliable Secretary of the RCD, and to all students, your advisors, faculty members, and consultants here present today, to our esteemed judges who gave their most precious time and talent to us, and lastly, of course, to the administration who are very much supportive of all our activities. With much appreciation I cannot fully express, we send to you our heartfelt gratitude. We certainly hope this activity will further enhance our interest in research and bring us all to explore the many things still unknown to mankind. I think the words of Albert Einstein is most apropos to this event. If we knew what it was we were doing, it would not be called research. Mabuhay ang FEU and RMF.
Thank you so much for those closing remarks, Dr. Yandelar. Thank you, sir.
We are now going to present on screen the certificates of participation to our finalists and certificate of appreciation to our judges. The certificate reads, Far Eastern University Dr. Nicanor Reyes Medical Foundation, Quezon City, Philippines. Research Center for Development and the Subcommittee on Students' Research. In line with the 2021 Institutional Research Day, award this Certificate of Participation to Section 2G Group 1 for presenting the paper entitled Perception on Telemedicine by Physician as a Mode of Consultation during COVID-19 Pandemic in the Second Year Medical Students Research Contest online presentation via Zoom. Given this 19th day of May, signed by the Research Center for Development Chairman, Dr. Ray Melchor F. Santos, and the Vice President for the Academic Affairs, Dr. Polly Chua Chan.
The same certificate of participation is also given to Section 2C Group 1 for presenting the paper entitled A Systematic Review of SARS-CoV-2 Mutation in relation to its pathogenicity.
Certificate of Appreciation is also awarded to Section 2D Group 1 for presenting the paper entitled Medical Students' Perception Towards Virtual Learning Environment According to the Dominant Personality Trait.
The same certificate of participation is awarded to Section 2H, Group 1, for presenting their paper entitled Satisfaction of Medical Students, Satisfaction of Medical Students of Different Learning Styles to Online Education during the COVID-19 Pandemic.
Also, Certificate of Participation is awarded to Section 2A, Group 1, for presenting the paper entitled Education in the Midst of a Pandemic, Distraction in Online Learning Amongst Medical Students.
And now we are going to award the Certificate of Appreciation to our judges. The certificate reads, Far Eastern University Dr. Nicanor Reyes Medical Foundation, Quezon City, Philippines, Research Center for Development, and the Subcommittee on Students' Research, in line with the 2021 Institutional Research Day, presents this Certificate of Appreciation to Dr. John Rob Y. Bantang, PhD, as judge in the Second Year Medical Students Research Contest, online presentation via Zoom, given this 19th day of May 2021, signed Dr. Ray Melchor F. Santos, the chairman for the Research Center for Development, and signed Dr. Polly T. Chua Chan, the vice president for Academic Affairs. May I request Dr. John Rob Bantang to please turn on your camera for a picture taking. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Thank you, sir. The same certificate of appreciation is given to, next slide, please, to Mel Valerie C. Ordinario, RND, MD, FPCP, DPSMO. Ma'am, please turn on your camera for short picture taking. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Thank you, ma'am. One more, ma'am. 1, 2, 3. Okay po. Thank you, ma'am. And last but not least, the same certificate of appreciation is awarded to Dr. Ryan A. Ebardo, DIT. Sir, can you turn on your camera, please? Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Thank you, sir. On behalf of the organizers of this event, we would like to thank you for being with us this morning. So now, may we now call on the chairman of the Board of Judges, Dr. John Rob Bantang, to announce the winners. Our first placer will get a cash prize of 8,000 pesos. The second placer will get 6,000 pesos, 4,000 pesos for the third placer. The efforts of the other finalists will not go unnoticed because they will be receiving a cash prize of 2,000 pesos. The winning papers will also be published at the original article section of the FEU and RMF journal. Dr. John Rob.
Thank you. As it is, it seems that all the participants are already winners. And given that they are able to present in this audience, their respective research is already a sign that they did well in their respective research endeavors. Congratulations to everyone, firstly. But unfortunately, we are forced to declare the winners, and we have to choose the top 3, right? From our scoring system, and upon the deliberation among the judges, we have chosen the following. I would like to first mention the third placer. Congratulations to the team 2C1, Systematic Review of SARS-CoV Mutation in Relation to its Pathogenicity. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Section 2C, Group 1. May I just read the certificate of recognition, sir? So, Far Eastern University, Dr. Nicanor Reyes Medical Foundation, Quezon City, Philippines, Research Center for Development, and the Subcommittee on Students' Research, in line with the 2021 Institutional Research Day, awards this certificate of recognition to Section 2C, Group 1, as third place winner for the paper entitled A Systematic Review of SARS-CoV-2 Mutations in Relation to its Pathogenicity in the second year medical students research contest online presentation via Zoom, given this 13th day of May 2021. Signed, Dr. Ray Melchor F. Santos, the chairman for the Research Center for Development, and Dr. Polly Chua Chan, vice president for academic affairs. May I request, sir, the members of Section 2C Group 1 to please turn on their cameras for a picture taking. 2C Group 1, please turn on your cameras po. Okay. Okay, let's take a picture. Okay, ready, guys? Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, one more. 1, 2, 3, and smile. Okay, thank you so much. Sir, you have the floor again.
Thanks. For the other places, of course, ano bang maganda? I would declare the second na lang, no? The second placer. Notice that they are not so far away from each other, no? So it's quite difficult to judge among them. And now I declare that the second placer is Group 2G1. Perception of telemedicine by physicians as mode of consultation during COVID-19 pandemic. Congratulations, team.
Congratulations, Section 2G1. Also, certificate of recognition is awarded to you guys as second placer, no, for the paper entitled "Perception of Telemedicine by Physician as a Mode of Consultation During the COVID-19 Pandemic." May I request again to for the Section 2G Group 1 to please turn on your camera for the documentation. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. One more. 1, 2, 3, smile. Thank you.
Sir,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now for the most awaited, the winner in this event is Group 2H1. Congratulations, satisfaction of medical students of different learning styles to online education during the COVID-19 pandemic. Congratulations.
Congratulations, classmates. So they are also given this certificate of recognition as first place winners for the paper entitled Satisfaction of Medical Students of Different Learning Styles to Online Education During the COVID-19 Pandemic. So members of Section 2H Group 1, please turn on your cameras. Okay, congrats again, guys. Okay. May I also request the advisor to please turn on your camera, sir? If he is here, is Dr. Who's here? Dr. Aben. Yeah, Dr. Aben. Okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. One more. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, congratulations again, Section 2H, Group 1, for winning the first. So thank you again, Dr. John Rob Bantang, and congratulations to all the winners. Congratulations, guys.
Now may Now may I request all the students to please turn on your camera for the picture taking. Again, may I request all the students to please turn on your camera for the picture taking. Thank you. Ready? 1, 2, 3, smile. One more. 1, 2, 3, smile. One more. 1, 2, 3, smile. One more. 1, 2, 3, smile. 1, 2, 3, smile. 1, 2, 3, smile. 1, 2, 3, smile. One more. 1, 2, 3, smile. 1, 2, 3, smile. 1, 2, 3, smile. Thank you, guys. So, ladies and gentlemen, We will now have the singing of the FU hymn.
So sorry, we're having technical difficulties again. Okay, yeah, there it is. Once again, the FEU hymn.
That concludes 2021 Second Year Medical Students Research Contest. This has been Amadeus Jose Isidore P. Plete.
And this has been Mark Luis Fuertes Fernandez. Thank you and have a good day. Ad Astra, Pera Spera.
Thank you, everyone.